Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar for PennTESOL East for 2026. We are so excited that you're here today to kick off the year of professional development brought to you by PennTESOL East. I want to introduce myself first. My name is Bill Albertson, and I am currently the chair of webinars. I am a board member at PennTESOL East, and I was the president of PennTESOL East for 2024 and 2025. So I'm really excited now that I am no longer the president to be able to work on these other initiatives and boost our webinar series and boost our other special events. And so I'm glad you're here to support PennTESOL East and support our initiatives for great professional development throughout the year. I want to let you know what our next webinar is going to be so that you can mark your calendars today. On March 25th, that is a Wednesday, we will have a webinar at 6 p.m. featuring Kathy Detmer and Ruby Chen from Drexel University, who will be talking about using music in the foreign language classroom. Kathy Detmer recently published a book chapter about using music in her French classroom, and she also teaches ESL. Ruby teaches both Chinese and English and uses music in her classes. And so they have some very inventive ways of using it that I hadn't thought of before. So if you want to learn all their secrets, please mark your calendars for March 25th at 6 p.m. Also, we want you to mark your calendars for an in-person event at the Welcoming Center in Philadelphia on May 30th. And that is going to be our spring event. It will be a half-day event, and we're going to be trying a new format this year. So please mark your calendar for that and check your email for details as we tell you what's going on. With no further ado, I want to turn it over to Alicia Moreno, who is going to introduce today's speaker. Alicia?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm very privileged to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Elena Lawrick. She is an associate professor of leadership and education at Alvernia University, where she teaches graduate and doctoral level courses in TESOL, education, and leadership. She holds a PhD from Purdue University and brings extensive experience as a TESOL practitioner, having taught ESL and EFL and provided academic support to multilingual students in U.S. higher education. Dr. Lawrick has designed, directed, and taught ESL courses and TESOL programs, and she regularly works with pre-K through 12 educators to strengthen instructional practices for multilingual students. And on a personal note, I would just like to say that it is Dr. Lawrick who brought me into the fold, teaching multilingual students. It was she who first, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking. It was she who first brought me into the ESL classroom to teach, and that very first semester, it just cemented my passion for this field. And she was the most incredible mentor. And I'm very, very thankful that she trusted me to pass on the baton when she moved on from our program at RAC to Alvernia University here in Berks County. So Dr. Lawrick, thank you so much for your mentorship, your leadership in this field in Berks County, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia, for this wonderful introduction and humbling introduction, really. I am so very grateful, so very proud and grateful for your leadership at RAC ESL academic program. And it's like, since we're doing ads of the events, and I would like to make a couple of points before we get into the conversation or collective thinking. So, Alicia introduced me as associate professor and TESOL practitioner I've been doing it for over 30 years. But there is one more very important role or experience that probably shaped the way how I see teaching ESL. I also learned I am an English language learner. So I did learn English in as a foreign language first in the Soviet Union and then post-Soviet Russia, and taught English as a teacher, as English as a foreign language, then taught teachers how to teach English as a foreign language, then did it all over again in the US. So that's really important. So that's probably this being an English learner probably works as a grounding in everything I do and when I work with teachers, because that student lens, student perspective never leaves me. Okay. So that's one thing. And since we're advertising events, I really want to invite you to Berks County on April 11th. So we have a group that work specifically or subgroup specifically with volunteer ESL teachers who teach adult ESL, and we invite everyone to just to be with us to spend half a day at Alvernia University downtown campus building for training and for something very practical and very, very focused on working specifically with adult ESL. So if you have any interest, I'm sure that Val and Bill will uh, share this information, and please come. We're going to feed you, we're going to entertain you a little bit in strictly professional context. And so we see it as an opportunity to get together and to, and we have echo. If you could just maybe mute. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. So we see is this is an opportunity to advance our expertise a little more. Okay, so Bill and the board, thank you so much for this invitation. And colleagues, hello. Thank you for being here. It's a Saturday morning and we're still here, right? And we're here to think together about how tiny improvements in the quality of input that we provide to our students and the quality of interactions that happen during our lessons can significantly accelerate English language learning. So it's all about small, tiny adjustments in the way we do whatever we do every day when we teach that can really result in big changes for our students. So at the center of our webinar, of our today's conversation, are two major driving forces of language learning: input and interaction. These concepts come to us from second language acquisition research, but we're not going to dive deep in the research itself. So instead, I'm going to read a little bit, so I apologize for my eye contact that I will occasionally lose with you. I do it not because I don't know what to say, but because I'm super mindful of time. Okay, so let's think about our today's conversation as an invitation to re-examine how we speak, how we design teaching materials, how we design and facilitate student interaction. So everything that happens in our class that is facilitated by the teacher. So you may encounter some new information, but if you're a very experienced teacher, if you teach maybe second language acquisition class for in graduate program, maybe you will not get anything new. But what you do, what will happen, I hope, is that whatever whatever we talk today about will trigger your reflection and trigger your, like, maybe help you raise awareness of what is happening during the class and how it can be a little more effective so our students learn a little more from us. Okay, so if you are comfortable, can you please put in chat your teaching context so we will have a better idea from what backgrounds and experiences we all come here into the webinar today. So at some point in my talk, there will be moments of reflection. So I am inviting you to jot down your thoughts in response to those reflective questions. We may or may not have time to talk about it, to discuss those questions, to discuss your thoughts at the end of the webinar, but you will definitely like those ideas, those thoughts that come to you. Okay, thank you, Alicia. They're very important because they are the lens. They will frame how we evolve, how we advance our teaching expertise. Okay, on this note, I'm going to share screen and hope that it will work. Okay, just give me 1 second and slideshow. So here, I'm going to minimize myself. Here we go. And my slides. Okay, here we go. So, in a classroom setting, students learn English through a continuous interplay of input and interaction. They learn English by listening to the teacher speaking, by watching videos, by reading, and by working with print materials. All of these are various types of input or exposure to English. English learning also takes place socially and cognitively when students converse or interact in English with the teacher or with their peers. So put simply, everything that happens during the class time is a combination of input and interaction. When the quality of input and interaction is sufficiently high, our students master English faster. So this is why we're going to do a very brief overview of what is known from research about input and interaction. And then we will focus directly on those key strategies that allows every teacher to enhance the quality of their input and interaction. So to begin, let's recall briefly what second language acquisition research tells us about how English is learned. So research identified 4 building blocks of language learning, 4 essential components. The first one is input. And input provides linguistic data necessary for acquisition. So input is everything that our students see or hear. The second major element of language learning is interaction. So the use of English that enables learners to process input, to negotiate meaning, and produce language. That is, use English, right? The third very, very important element, which we rarely think about, is cognitive processing. So cognitive processing of both input and interaction. And the final block is communicative context. After all, we all learn languages to communicate and socially engage in them. So to be effective in teaching English, we want to optimize that input interaction. We want to really maximize, take advantage of the interplay between exposure, between the use, cognitive process, and social engagement. So I'm going to show you the view on language learning from Dr. Larson Freeman. And Dr. Larson Freeman is I am going to, so sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. So, sorry, wrong slide. So what do we know about input or exposure to English? So from second language research on input, we know that to learn any language, any new language, we need rich input. Rich and meaningful input provide opportunities for learning vocabulary and grammar and support development of overall English proficiency. However, being simply surrounded by English will not result in being proficient in it. Amount, quality, and contextual relevance of input are extremely important. Here's why. So let's imagine a person who is surrounded by English, they cannot understand. So for that person, English is simply some noise that they can ignore for a while. Or they can use contextual clues to make sense of that English noise. They can correctly guess some snippets of the conversation. However, those efforts that they put in making sense of that English noise quickly make them fatigued. So that's an image of the student in our class. Every single student in our English lesson, at least once, had that experienced and felt like this. So now that we have this image, let's connect it with research and pedagogy. So an English learner transitions from being simply exposed to English to being able to speak and write in English through cognitive processing that called intake. So input, intake, output. Our students need to be able to process input in their mind to convert it into intake in order to be able to speak or write in English, that is, to produce output. To become intake, input must be noticed, comprehended, and internalized. So when we expose our students to too much amount of English, say we're talking to a little too, excuse me, say we're talking for a long time, or a video is a little too long, then our students do not process input. They start ignoring it. They also experience cognitive fatigue and then eventually shut down. This is why the golden rule of teaching English as a second language is less is more. So less amount, but better quality. So what else research tells us about input? Input needs to be comprehensible. That is, students should be able to understand what they hear or read. They need to know most of the words or be able to guess meanings from contextual clues. So context is very important. We can't just talk without surrounding our speech with contextual clues that help our students comprehend and notice those new words or correct pronunciation, so they will continue learning English. But just being comprehensible is not enough for input, for exposure. Input also needs to be a little higher than the current proficiency level, slightly above the proficiency level. So that is, there should be some new words, some new grammatical features or structured in order to move the proficiency to the next level. Now let's focus on interaction or the use of English. So as we established, just being exposed to English is not enough. And interactional studies in second language acquisition scholarship offer strong evidence that meaningful communication is crucial for language acquisition. So interaction works this way. It facilitates both input and output. It creates essential conditions for testing student mastery of English and receiving feedback that brings to student attention not quite correct usages of English that need to be relearned in order to improve accuracy and fluency when speaking and writing in English. And I'm going to take us to that slide that appeared at the wrong time. Okay, so Dr. Larson Freeman, one of the most prominent scholars in English language teaching and the author of complexity theory, offers, in my opinion, the most comprehensive explanation of how English as a new language is learned. So the quote is rather long. I'm going to read it, bear with me, and then to interpret it. So this is, let's kind of frame our mind, prepare. So we're talking about how is that, what is happening in with our students, how do they learn English? So English proficiency is a complex adaptive system which emerges in L2 learner's mind in response to interactions of multiple agents and social context. English learners use their language resources to respond intentionally to the communicative pressures presented by their interlocutors. Those resources include what English learners know about and can do in English, knowledge of their native languages and all known languages, and nonverbal behavior. Importantly, the important point here is that English proficiency develops from use. Stable knowledge of English emerges as a result of frequent reassembling of learners' language resources and communicative interactions. And I'm going to ask you to just finish reading the quote. And okay, thank you. And I hope that you noticed the important point that each time our students assemble their language resources. So each time they relearn, re-examine their knowledge of grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary. And the interlocutor, in our case, it's the teacher, and the context of situation, meaning what's happening in the class, affect the success of their relearning. So this is a comprehensive and really precise explanation of how people learn a new language. However, it's a little complex. So earlier this week, I was teaching a TESOL class on TESOL method with teachers from various school districts. So I asked the teachers in that class to interpret this quote by creating a metaphor. So with their permission, I'm going to share a couple of metaphors with you. So the first one is the Play-Doh metaphor. So it goes like this. Learning English is similar to playing with Play-Doh. Each time the person gets a new idea, the shape changes. And the other metaphor is putting together a puzzle. So at the beginning, when we start a puzzle, we have just a couple of pieces that fit together. And then we keep looking at that pile of disjointed pieces. And we may notice that one piece that may fit. So we add it to the initial cluster of connected pieces. And each time we notice that fitting piece and add it to the puzzle, the area that shows the image grows. So both metaphors convey the point that English learning is a dynamic process of not just learning new words that we teach, learning new grammar that we teach, but that continuous re-examining of all knowledge of English that the person has in their mind and adding that new piece of a puzzle. So in this process, during this process, cognitive noticing that new word or incorrect pronunciation plays a critically important role. And the teacher, all of us, have the power to make minor changes to activate, to improve, to enhance the student ability to notice what needs to be relearned by adjusting how we speak, what kind of materials we use, and how we facilitate their interactions. So from this point on, we're just going to look at input and interaction in the context of classroom learning. Okay, so in a lesson, input takes the following forms: teacher speaking. We may play a video. We may use songs, podcast, read alouds, which is audio, or our students may read passages and work with some kind of print materials. So I invite you to have the first moment of reflection. So think about your lessons, how you teach, but think about them through the lens of input. So these are the questions. Remember to jot down your ideas if you feel comfortable with doing that. So, thinking about input. Who and what supply input in your ESL lessons? Like, do you talk? Probably yes. Do you play videos? What textbook do you use? So think in specific terms. And then what is the dominant language of that input? Perhaps you have English and some kind of translations. Now, the other two questions are probably much more important. How long is a typical input piece? So if you speak, for how long do you speak? Do you speak like just for a few seconds and then engage students in the conversation? Or do you speak, tell them everything that they're going to do in this lesson today, and you speak for a minute or two? And then I'm inviting you to think in response to this question. Can you recall an instance when a student withdrew? Kind of like they appear that they are still listening, but they really stop listening actively, stop following your speech. So if this happened, then what were the signs? Why do you think it happened? So take a couple of seconds, maybe a minute, to think. I'm going to give you a moment. I'm going to be silent for a few seconds and then I will continue. But if you're reflecting, then please continue reflecting. Okay, so teacher speech. Let's spend some time with teacher speech. So all teachers, naturally, we speak. We dominate classroom conversations. It's a natural process. It's the nature of our job. So, however, in language teaching, teacher speech is the dominant, is the major source of of input. So when we think about teacher speech, we want to think about rate or speed, pace, tempo, sentence structures, lexical choices, vocabulary, idiomatic expression, then paraphrasing, repeating, maybe translanguaging, going back and forth between English and student native language, pausing, and non-linguistic scaffolding, which is nonverbal language, visuals, realia, and all the other possible contextual clues that support comprehension. So thinking about teacher speech this way, think about your recent lesson that you taught. Recall how you spoke and how your students reacted to your speech. Did they listen actively? And if they did, then which aspects of your speech most directly influence their comprehension and participation? So have that reflective moment one more time. now recall that our goal is to really re-examine everything that we do in class in terms of input. And input is teacher speech is the major source of input. So quality speech. So speech that promotes not just comprehension, but also supplies linguistic data for language learning. So such speech is clear, it's intelligible, it models proper use of English, it is adjusted to student English proficiency level while gently nudging them to move to the next level. The important characteristic is that quality speech is cognitively manageable for students to follow from beginning to end. And the other very important characteristic is that the quality speech should be contextualized to support comprehension. So context, cognitively manageable, adjusted to English proficiency level, but slightly above that level. And then something that we all keep in mind, and this is a second nature to us, it should be clear, it should be intelligible, and it should model proper use of English. So on this side of the slide, what you see is the strategies that allows us to create that quality speech. We want to speak slowly, kind of like I'm thinking that you're probably listening to me right now and you're thinking that she's speaking way too slow. But that's a habit of being an ESL teacher. So we want to speak more slowly than we are comfortable at, but at the same time, naturally. So please never stretch words, or please never increase the volume, speak louder. This is something like the other two, these two actions that sometimes we do it naturally, but they just don't do it. they are perceived very often as disrespectful. So more slowly but naturally. Pause more frequently, and don't just pause, but include your students in conversation. Face your students. Use simple, direct sentence structures. Just think about how often we say something like, I want you to open your book at page 8. So the main message is open your book on page 8. But we add so many distractions at the beginning, and this is something that causes cognitive fatigue. This is something that makes our students pay attention to those words that really are not directly relevant to the communicated message. So eliminate distractions. Use simpler vocabulary. Repeat and paraphrase. And I want to highlight these 2 points, like verbally emphasize the target grammar, vocabulary, and corrected utterance to help students notice them. Recall how earlier I was talking about exposure to English, the continuum of exposure to English or input and use of English or output. And in between, we have intake. And intake is processing of input in student mind. That happens because the teacher helped the student notice something that needs to be relearned or learned. That's drawing that attention through verbal emphasis is probably one of the most effective ways to do so. Then create contexts that support comprehension by using gestures, visuals, reality, and so on. And finally, transitions or translanguages. So if I have to teach Russian students or Ukrainian students, and who are at the very, very, very beginning of their journey to learn English, I will probably be using Russian or Ukrainian from time to time, whenever it's appropriate, whenever it's the most efficient way to convey meaning of unknown words. However, if I have to teach Spanish speaking students, I will not have a knowledge of Spanish. So in this case, I won't be able to rely on translanguage and on going back and forth. Maybe at the beginning level, I would be using technology to help with some translations. Now, a couple of more thoughts. So we want to limit the use of idioms and figurative language. And we always think about idioms, which are difficult to interpret, as some weird expression that we may or may not use. Like for some reason, people always say rain, cats, and dogs as an example of idioms, which we don't really use. What we tend to forget is that phrasal verbs like pull out, take away, they are idiomatic and they're difficult to comprehend. So when we work with the beginners or low intermediate students, we really want to use single verbs that are easier to interpret and then gradually introduce our students, to more idiomatic expressions. And finally, be aware of cultural references. I once had observed a class where a teacher taught a group of all English learners from various backgrounds, and the main source of input, there was a text on Easter holiday that the teacher assumed that these students are very, very acculturated in it. And in that particular case, students just came into the US and they may or may not celebrate Easter. And the point is that cultural relevance, cultural reference was appropriate for some, but the details of the story, which teacher assumes that students share that cultural knowledge, didn't make any sense to students, and the lesson was ineffective. So just be sensitive to or critical to the text that you're using or assumptions that you're making. Okay, on this note, I'm going to stop share and reshare. So let's watch. Let's watch a lesson where a teacher talks for just 1 minute. Okay? So, and I'm going to give you a little task for watching. So notice how long the teacher talks, how fast teacher talk, whether she uses complex or simple sentence structures, and whether she creates a context that support comprehension. Okay, so length, speed, pacing, sentence structure, lexical complexity, and contextual clues. So I will have to reshare. And go here. Okay, so how's the sound? Is it too loud?
Okay.
Bill, can you please tell me, does it sound okay? Is
It
the sound
sounds
okay?
great to me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Before fall break, we were talking about a short story that was entitled All Summer in a Day. Do you remember that? Well, we're going to discuss that today. We're going to talk about it. And after we do that, I'm going to give you a piece of informational text about a planet. And you can probably guess what planet it's going to be about because it's parallel to our story. And you're going to do a close read on that informational text, okay? We talked about close reads before. Do you remember when we read The Bracelet and we had an informational text on Pearl Harbor, and you had to do a close read on that, which is different than just reading it normally, okay? So you're going to do a close read on the informational text on a Venus sky show, right? After you do your close read, we're going to
Okay, so What did you notice? Since I was told that I don't need to worry too much about time, I'm going to have a little bit of conversation. So no opportunities for student engagement. Thank you so much. So can you please either unmute yourself or type it? Okay, too much info. Okay.
Too
Anything
fast.
else? Too fast. Okay. No visual
Too
support.
fast. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to kind of like wrap it up. So look, the point is, so the message that was communicated was really important. The teacher was giving complex instructions. There were multiple steps. And she did a really good job pronouncing everything correctly, right? And probably if we ask that teacher how fast she was talking, she would say, "What are you saying? What do you mean? I was talking very clearly. I slowed down." And yes, she did slow down, probably, but yes, for English language learners, it was too fast. And importantly, it was too long,
Yes.
uninterrupted.
Too long. Yeah.
So cognitive fatigue. Remember that mental image of that English noise that students just ignore, or they try to follow and then very quickly they stop ignoring. And there was this teacher did a lot of wonderful used a lot of strategies. She paraphrased, she said, "Remember that planet," right? And yet it was the teacher who did all the learning for English learners. That whole minute, and she talks in the lesson for several minutes, was just a waste of time. So teacher worked real hard without really teaching effectively. So instead of "remember that planet," what if there would be a little question answers teacher student exchange inserted, right? So what if she would created the context? The biggest thing for me is that there were no contextual clues. There was no context. There was just teacher talking. There were words. When we teach, we really want to surround our speech with contextual clues. Maybe some key words that from time to time we point to them. Maybe we don't really, I guess what I'm trying to say is that when we think about input, we always think that it needs to be comprehensible. That's it, period. But that's not enough. Input needs to be comprehensible, but also our students need to be cognitively engaged. They have to work real hard to notice what we need them to notice. Okay? So I asked Bill to share. Why does it happen to me? Okay, sorry. Just give me 1 second. Slide. Here we go. And it's a little tricky, so I apologize for this. Why does it happen? Okay, here we go. So at the end of our talk, I asked Bill to attach the slides of this that I'm using today. And on those slides, you have two wonderful resources. So one is the very short 4-minute long video by Valentina Gonzalez, where she demonstrates comprehensible input. And she's really good at showing those using contextual clues and using the right pace of her speech, pacing. And so that's one resource that I'm suggesting you to check. And then test your normal speech rate here. That's a neat tool just to raise your awareness of how fast or how slow you talk. So for English language learners, the appropriate rate or speed of speech is lower than 100 words per minute. So we typically use 120, 160 words per minute. And sometimes we have teachers who are under the pressure of putting everything into the lesson to follow the curriculum, to meet the curriculum demands. They talk faster. Okay, so the key points to remember about teacher speech is that speech, the way we speak, needs to support comprehension, model correct use of English, and move student to the next level of English proficiency. So there should be some challenge, but not too much challenge. And probably one more really important point is that adjusting teacher speech is a very dynamic process that is based on our knowledge of student proficiency level, language needs, and native language. So we cannot just adjust our speech, the way we speak with a student once for all, but the more proficient, the more comfortable with English a student becomes, the more the less adjusted our speech should be, the more natural our speech should become. So in the same way, we cannot speak with all ESL students in class in the same way because they will be on different level of proficiency. Okay, so let's talk about videos. Do you use videos in your lessons? Can you do a show of hands, which I will not see, but just for the sake of the group? Okay, we all love videos, right? And it's so many opportunities right now. We can use the videos which from YouTube, from various like PennTESOL or Nearpod, or we can create authentic videos. So when we work with videos, we want to keep them short. And I mean short from the student perspective. We want to only use in the video the part that is directly relevant to the learning focus of the lesson. And the playback speed needs to be adjusted a little bit. So 0.75 seems to be a good middle ground, but sometimes when we have a student that moves from intermediate to higher level of English proficiency, then we just need to slow down just a little. So because such students will be able to comprehend, but if the video speed is not adjusted, then they will not learn from something new from that video. Now, what works really well is assigning a task for watching. For example, let's just a moment ago, I told that we're going to explain that we're going to watch the video, but I give you a task. So let's watch for this and this and that. So given a task, really engage that cognitive processing of input. And another thing is that inserting comprehension checks also supports that processing of input. I hugely recommend Edpuzzle, which is free tool for editing, trimming those videos that from YouTube and adding comprehension checks, slowing down, and just customizing a video to the need of your students. So captions. I am not sure where you stand on captions, but a standard recommendation in many schools is just to add captions in English or in native language, and YouTube gives us all these options. However, captions may or may not work. They may or may not support comprehending that input. For example, a student, say, in a hypothetical situation, we are using English video in English, and we're adding subtitles in Spanish, thinking that we will support the comprehension of the video by adding these Spanish subtitles. Now, many of our students cannot read in Spanish, so it won't work. Another hypothetical scenario when captions may not work well is when student may be able to read in, maybe literate in English and their native language. However, the captions may work as unnecessary distraction. They may be student may be neurally diverse the way how they process information. So I guess my recommendation is be very careful with adding captions. Okay. And I'd like to move us to my to the part of the input talk, which deals with print materials. So print materials, think about reading, think about worksheets, like everything that is printed, right? So it's very, very easy right now to create customized print materials for customized teaching materials for our lessons with AI. However, when we do that, we want to be careful with about images that we're using. So the common perception is that images, they support comprehension, which is absolutely true. However, images, they also may be interpreted in various ways. So when we use images, we want to only use those images which have very clear, unambiguous interpretation. And if we cannot find the image that illustrate the words clearly, then it's better not to use it and rely on translation or definition. And then another kind of like mental note that we all want to have when we work or create the customized print material or worksheet, say, for our class, is the power of implicit learning. So everything that our students see in our class, they perceive as examples of accurate use of English. So I'm going to take us to a little demonstration of creating a visual, creating an activity with DFID, and how AI, probably unintentionally, promotes the incorrect use of English. And finally, avoid crowdness that may, like putting too much stuff on one page, that may trigger cognitive fatigue. So here's my example. Okay, so before I put on the screen that handout that I created, and it only took me like 5 minutes, and it's a material for a couple of lessons probably. I invite us to think about the power of implicit learning. So when our students learn English, they learn it through explicit teaching. This is what we teach. And they also learn it implicitly, like from what they hear, from what they read, kind of like picking up that language. So what's really important to keep in mind is that our students learn more from what they see and hear, meaning implicitly, than from they're taught by the teacher. So we work so hard to teach English explicitly, and it's very important and it's needed. But our students pick up that English through exposure, and when the exposure is not quite correct, then they learn incorrect use of English, and they remember somehow it easier, and it gets stuck with them. So here's my little demonstration. So I was thinking that I imagine that what if I teach a class tomorrow, and I know that Philadelphia Flower Show is coming up. So, and say, I want to read a text about Philadelphia Flower Show. So I spent literally 5 minutes on creating enough material to cover during more than one lesson. So first I went to Wikipedia. Okay, yes. First, I went to Wikipedia and I searched for entry Philadelphia Flower Show. I got a really nice text, Philadelphia Flower Show. But what if my students are not so proficient and this text is a little too complex? So instead of going to ChatGPT, which ChatGPT is wonderful, we are all using it, but there is a better tool specifically designed for creating reading comprehension and vocabulary exercises. So I went to DIFIT. So if you're familiar with that, wonderful, use it. It has a free option. If you're not familiar with the application, then I encourage you to look at it. So on this note, before I show it to you, I want to apologize for the timing, and it appears that we're close to 11. Can I still show you the what I did with DFID? And maybe ask for your permission if you want to stay, and we'll talk briefly about interaction. And if you want me to stop, I will stop. Is that okay?
So Dr.
Okay,
Lawrick, I think what we can do is those of us who need to leave at 11, thank you for coming. Those of us who want to stay a little longer, we're going to be here.
Thank you for your patience and for your understanding. It's input and interaction, and English language teaching is so complex. It's just so difficult to just talk about one little thing without actually opening that can of worms. So, okay, this is my Philadelphia Flower Show, and I'm sharing the screen. Okay, here we go. So, and Bill, if you could maybe attach this document and put it in chat so people can follow more easily through the just opening it on their laptops. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I put it in the chat earlier and again now.
Thank you so much. Okay, so very easy. Like I said, I love creating original materials, so it's relevant. Remember, input needs to be relevant. So I imagine that my students are from Philadelphia area, went to Wikipedia, put this copied that Philadelphia Flower Show article, opened DFID, then said, okay, first I told AI, I said, modify the passage for low intermediate proficiency by using simpler language, adding Spanish translations for the most challenging words only, and using sentence frames. And then AI asked me a question, what kind of lesson I would like to teach. So I selected that I want to have reading comprehension and speaking. I also said that my lesson will combine teacher-led instruction, small group learning, and individual practice. So I wanted to create a material which works really for all situations and give me some flexibility. So it really took me, I don't know, several seconds to type it, to click, and and then I got a lot of materials, and that looked something like that. I'm going to scroll up. Okay, it looked like this. Modified reading passage, beautiful image here. Then the story with all vocabulary target words being bold-faced, and then vocabulary words translated. Then I had a little matching exercise, fill in the blanks. So I had a lot of exercises with which I could play in my lesson, and depending on how the lesson goes, I can really, I have enough to adjust. Okay, and there is this sentence starters. Okay, but so what I'm saying is that AI gives us flexibility. It gives us excellent tools. But we shouldn't forget about very important responsibility when we teach, is that whatever AI created, we have to double check, because we, the teachers, have the knowledge of accurate use of English. And we have to remember that our students, when they see something that is incorrect, but it comes from the teacher, they perceive it as, do it this way. This is the correct way. So they learn implicitly. So in my case, when I was looking through that, I noticed that in a couple of places, specifically vocabulary practice and those words when they were defined, AI capitalized all common nouns. And I was thinking, I know why I did it, because it starts everything as a new sentence, applying sentence case capitalization. But if my students see that, then I will have to teach them that this is wrong. Or I can skip it, and then I will be responsible for them over capitalizing all the time. So what I did is, so in DFID, on your right, there is an opportunity to talk with AI. And so I told AI, in keywords and vocabulary practice, change capitalization of common nouns to lowercase. So instead of manually going there and correcting every word and every Spanish translation, I just said, do it, apply to everything. So AI reported, few seconds later, done. I've changed the capitalization of common nouns to lowercase in both the keywords section and vocabulary practice activity, words like collaborate, blah, blah, blah. So that's wonderful. So what I got, and you will see the second PDF. So you will see the same material, but done twice. First the original version and then edited version. So I put the title. So I just typed in the title, Philadelphia Flower Show, and I double check. And look, all the vocabulary words appear the way they are supposed to appear. So the point here is that AI gives us wonderful tools. And yet, as teachers who actually know how second language is learned, we have to think about the quality of that input. We have to think about the power of implicit learning and make sure that the input that we provide really models the correct use of English, because we don't have to teach everything. Sometimes we just have to expose our students and draw their attention to that specific aspect of English, which they will pick up by themselves on their own. Okay, so my question for you is that when you think about input and quality of input, and thank you so much for bearing with me talking for so long, thinking about your speech, the video, and print material, what is one tiny shift, one tiny change, one minor adjustment in the way how you teach that you can implement immediately to make input in your class more accessible and, importantly, more supportive of English learning? Just think about this question and maybe assign or articulate your own professional goal for input. Okay, moving to interactions. That's going to be short, I promise. So interactions in our lessons. So rule number 1, our students must speak in order to learn English. So we cannot have silent students. And maybe If you are teaching a traditional ESL, such as working with adult ESL students, then this is a must for you. That's something that happens every time. However, if you're a pre-K-12 teacher, or maybe you are a university professor where you have a multilingual student in your class, then speaking doesn't really have a lot of, doesn't really happen often. So keep in mind that those interactions are really important, because oracy, or ability of listening actively and speaking in response, in other words, communicate in English, is the driving force of English as a foreign language. So when we think about interactions in a lesson, we think about teacher to student conversation, student to student conversation, and beyond the classroom, student to AI agent conversation. It's really a wonderful new tool when you can assign as practice homework maybe, or suggest or recommend to have students practice or do speaking practices with AI like Gemini or Elsa Speak. So if you think about your lessons and you want to reflect on interactions in your lessons through that interaction lens, think about this, or kind of like analyze your lessons through these two questions. When you ESL students work in pairs or in groups, what structures that you currently use guide their language use? Do you use sentence frames, sentence starters? Do you assign task roles? Do you use information gaps activities? Or do you articulate output requirements, what exactly they need to do in English? Or how do you typically respond to English learner errors? Do you ignore them? Or do you recast, meaning you just repeat correctly immediately after the student? Do you prompt? Or do you explicitly correct? And why? Why and I guess when? So that's our reflection moment. And I'm going to skip student-to-student conversations. And if we have time, we'll come back to them. I'm going to keep us to the teacher-student conversation. So every time when we speak with a student during our class, it can be short exchange, like teacher asked a question, student answered, or it can be more lengthy conversation. So our conversation with students, our interaction with students, they need to serve two purposes. One is that they need to promote student ability to speak for communicative purpose. So in this case, we target fluency, development of fluency in English use. And two is every conversation, to some extent, should offer corrective feedback. And in this case, we target accuracy in English use. So fluency and accuracy. Extend conversation and offer some corrective feedback. Okay. So when we give feedback, we really want to prioritize feedback by addressing the most salient challenges of students. For example, so when we teach English to Spanish-speaking students, the one of the challenges, like the way in their English use, is not pronouncing the ending consonants. So kind of like not saying those last, at the end of the word, not saying one or two consonants. And it happened because of the Spanish influence. So it's called cross-linguistic interference or influence. So that is something too important to address. We don't really have to go into long explanation of why, but we can create a teaching moment where they would remember. We have to create a memorable strategy for them to be aware of that pronunciation difficulty and kind of like self-correct. So one of my brilliant teachers I work with, she works in elementary context. So she teaches her kindergartners to touch something, I don't remember what, cheek or ear for that particular final consonant. Now, another really key challenge is stress. English stress communicates meaning. And in Spanish and French, stress works differently. So that's why we have that unintelligible speech. In Russian, stress works kind of like in English in the same way it communicates meaning. However, we put stress on different syllable. And it doesn't matter how long I teach English or how long I live in the US, I'm still under the influence of Russia or sometimes to put stress in the wrong place. So dealing with stress is easy because we just need to create some kind of movement to connect stress with the movement, tapping, clapping, or whatever. Okay, so meaning prioritize feedback. And then feedback strategies need to be they're context dependent. So we want to vary feedback based on the goal and on communicative situation. And for this, we need to develop a repertoire of strategies. So let's look at the examples. I'm going to stop share for a second. Let's look at the examples of the same, two examples of the same situation where a teacher, okay, sorry, I just got distracted by reading a chat. So let's look at the two examples of the same situation, same conversation, where a teacher was in one of the version of the conversation, teacher was more intentional in extending that conversation, in providing feedback. And then I will briefly show you the types of corrective feedback that you can use. So Bila will need your help. So we're going to act out a conversation twice, and I would need you to work as a student. And disclosure, he had no idea that I will ask him to do that. No? Okay. So
Surprise, but I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, surprise. Okay, so let's imagine the situation where we're teaching a content lesson. It's 6th or 7th grade, and our students learn about density as a concept and vocabulary that was introduced to them. And now that we went through vocabulary, teacher went creative and really decided to do a little bit of experiential learning. So the teacher puts students in groups and they conduct experiments. So they have the container with water, they have a piece of wood, they have a screw, and they drop, submerge those piece of water and a screw, piece of wood and screw in water, and they figure out which is less dense and which is more dense. So what's really important recall how I said that speaking must be present all the time. So at the end of the experiment, teacher, being a really, really good, effective teacher, walks around and talks with group, and student reports back. And that's the conversation that we are going to act out in Prep 2. Okay? So the first version. The first version. And oh, I just so miss old times when we were in person. Okay, excellent. So I'm the teacher, Bill is the student. So hi, Bill, what did you find out?
If you put a wood in the water, it stay up.
Good. What else?
The thing, you put the thing and it go down in a water.
Well done. So what happens is that teacher is happy that the student was brave enough to and willing to communicate in English. So we have relationship building, motivation, encouragement. Excellent, right? And we have a little bit of those questions that elicit some answers like what did you find out? What else? But what we don't see here is that we don't really see opportunities to relearn language. And by language in this case, what I mean is that we have vocabulary and grammar here. So, vocabulary, we have wood, but the word screw is not said. So the student is really brilliant and using pragmatic competence by like the way to get around of that, not knowing the word. The thing, you put the thing, right? And then we have grammar, which is a would, stay up. So remember how when we give feedback, we want to promote fluency and use of English, so communicate more, say more, and accuracy. So teacher clearly ignores grammar here, but there is an opportunity to kind of like take that student knowledge of the word screw to the level, to the next level. So when our students acquire or learn English words, vocabulary, they don't just learn them they don't go from not knowing to knowing. They go, it's a very gradual process. And before that depth of vocabulary knowledge, meaning ability to automatically retrieve the word from the memory and pronounce it and use it correctly, emerge, they kind of like in their knowledge of words is in between. They know it, they recognize it, but this word is not readily available for use. So we're going to act out the same conversation, but in a different version. Hi, Bill, what did you find out?
If you put a wood in the water, it stay up.
The wood floats. The wood floats? Okay, what else?
The thing, you put the thing and it go down in a water.
What goes down?
The screw go down in a water.
What causes the screw to sink?
The screw sink because to screw to
The screw sinks because it's more dense or less dense?
more dense. The screw sink because it more dense.
Yes, the screw is more dense and so it sinks in the water. What about the wood?
The wood less dense. The wood float because it less dense.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bill, for this. So what we're seeing here is that the teacher uses the voice. Remember how I was talking about those strategies to use teacher speech a little more effective? And one of the strategies was to use verbal emphasis. So when the teacher says the wood flows, we can just say it a little louder and just stretch it a little bit. So what we do is that we draw student attention to this word. So noticing happens and that input, just exposure, just that noise actually gets internalized and processed and become intake. And that helps to produce, to use the word. And that's why we have here what goes down screw, right? So the student kind of fished out that out of their memory that initial knowledge, recognition, and initial knowledge of the word screw and start using it. So two goals are accomplished in this version of the conversation. The teacher used feedback and various types of feedback to extend conversation and to move the student knowledge of vocabulary to the more solid ground, I would say, to the next level, from recognition, not knowing that, kind of know that it's a screw, but I don't remember how to say it, so it's a thing. And then to actually saying the screw. And then the teacher also used the voice to emphasize, to draw attention to whatever English needs to be noticed. And yet the teacher chose to disregard the grammar, because recall how at the very beginning I said amount of input is important. So if we try to address both vocabulary and communication goal and grammar, then we will overload the students and we will not be effective. We will not accomplish what we want to accomplish. So speaking of the feedback in English language teaching, and second language acquisition research, we would use the word corrective feedback. But really, we want to think in simple terms, and is everything what teacher says in response to not quite correct use utterance in English of our students. So the feedback may promote fluency and willingness to communicate. The person needs to be very brave to communicate in public in English. Then the feedback, the way how we respond to students, it can promote fluency with some attention to accuracy. This is what happened in our second version of the conversation, where the teacher still rephrased, reformulated in a correct way and said stays, kind of like draw attention, but didn't really make that correction the focus of the whole conversation. And then the feedback can promote accuracy in English use. So the four common types of feedback are recasts, clarification requests, prompt, and elicitation. We have little examples here and explanations, and I am going to just maybe comment on these feedback types, hoping that you will read the explanation and you will read the examples on your own. So recasts. Every single teacher naturally will recast. Students will say something incorrectly and we immediately repeat. So recasts are great because they keep conversation going. They promote the willingness to use English, to speak in English. But there is a little problem with recasts. So if we just repeat the utterance and reformulate the utterance correctly, if we just repeat in a correct English, students don't pay attention to it. They don't notice recasts. So if we use recasts, and we all use that, then we want to be very skillful with the verbal emphasis. So we want to be creative about drawing that attention of our students to that word that we pronounce correctly, or to that ending that we pronounce but student didn't say. So if we don't apply that verbal emphasis, if we don't draw attention, if we don't help student to notice, then recasts are a waste of time, okay? The other three are clarification request, prompt, and elicitation. So, and I do like clarification requests. Sometimes they may not work. So sometimes they can kill clarification requests, can kill motivation to speak. Like in this example, sorry, can you say that again? I'm not sure I understand. So be very sensitive to how your students respond to that. Prompts and elicitations, like when we pause, like here, she have two brothers, very simple example, but we prompt. Effective teachers prompt all the time. Okay, so she have two brothers. And then pause and gestures for correction. And if the teacher uses humor and have really good relationship with students, then prompting can be transformed in some sort of game between student and teacher. So once again, prompts is a signal that something is incorrect. It also is a signal that the teacher trusts that the student knows how to say it correctly and able to correct themselves. And elicitation is a kind of prompt where a teacher elicits the correct form by pausing, asking questions. So it's kind of like more developed prompt. So I would like to end my really long talk with thank you so much for being patient and with offering you a professional learning activity. We do it in several TESOL courses that I teach. I also do it for myself all the time. So it doesn't matter how experienced you are or how maybe less experienced you are or skilled you are. It is just very healthy exercise to do it. It'll take 2 days, and the purpose is to become more aware of the quality of your speech and the quality of your corrective feedback. And when I say quality, I mean, does your speech and does your corrective feedback effectively promote English learning? Remember how we shift the focus to student perspective, right? So I hope that, Bill, can you please attach it, put it in chat if you haven't done so? And if you have, thank you so much.
Yes, I put it in again. I have
Okay.
the 2 documents. So I have the Word document that includes all the information about your presentation, your curated reading list, your discussion questions, and professional activity, and then the separate PDF with the professional activity.
Okay, thank you so much. So here's how we do it. So first we need to prepare. So before we do that, it is very helpful to have a moment of reflection and briefly. So when it's good to put it in writing. So briefly describe your typical classroom speech in terms of speech rate, vocabulary choices, sentence complexity, repetition, and paraphrasing. Like, how fast do I speak? What about my vocabulary? What about my sentences? And do I paraphrase? And then also write down your belief about effective error correction type, like recasts are great. Prompts, not so much. So what types? So you kind of like create a mental inventory of, or you take a mental inventory of your input. Then during the first day, use your phone or use your laptop and very discreetly audio record the whole lesson. So it needs to be only audio because the focus is on the quality of speech and in terms of how it sounds and what, like the content of the speech, words and sentence structure. So it's very important to remember that this recording is yours for personal reflection. It needs to be deleted. It shouldn't be shared with anyone. It needs to be deleted after completing the activity. So later the same day, listen to the recording and analyze it from 3 different angles. So your speech, approximately how much, like you have to play it back 3 times. So each time zero on some specific focus of your analysis. So how much of the lesson did you speak? What purposes did you talk serve? Like did you give instructions? Did you explain something? Did you model? Did you class manage? How fast you spoke? How complex were your sentences structured, and so on and so forth. Then listen to it again. This time pay attention to your student's speech, which is a combination of interaction and output. How much did your students speak compared to you? In which languages? What functions did student talk serve? Did they practice something, like really repeated or read from the book? Or there was some mini negotiation or problem solving? Or what did they do when they spoke? And then listen to the recording third time, but this time only pay attention to those teacher-student conversation and specifically to how you corrected errors. So reflect. And at the end of the reflection, identify one specific adjustment for each area: how you speak, how your students interact in English during the lesson, and how you correct errors. Then delete the recording. And on a separate day, it's really need to be on a separate day. There should be a pause between this data collection instances. So identify one little change in each area. So set goals and record this lesson again, and then play recording 3 times, repeat this analysis and see how you did, what works, what didn't work. And then kind of be intentional as a follow-up, be very intentional with careful experimenting with your adjustments. Thank you. That's all. Wow, I took a lot of time. Okay, in my defense, my typical classes last 3 hours. So I have that internal clock that I have a lot of time. And I try to read at the beginning, but that's not how I usually communicate with the audience. So hence,
Well, we benefited from every minute of this. Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrick, for taking the time today to share all this with us. And thank you all for coming on a Saturday. Again, please mark your calendars for March 25th. That's a Wednesday at 6 p.m. for our next webinar about using music in the classroom by Kathy Detmer and Ruby Chan from Drexel University. And also mark your calendar for Saturday, May 30th for an in-person event at the Welcoming Center in Philadelphia. Check your email for more information about that. In the coming weeks, it's going to be a really exciting half-day event. Thank you again, Dr. Lawrick. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Alicia, for doing the introduction. And I wish you all a pleasant weekend.
Thank you. Thank you so much.